Hello everyone, this is Deidre and Lowell here at Italian Cowboy in beautiful Rockport, Fulton, Texas, where we are kicking off our first cooking class today. And we decided, as y'all know, many of you have asked over the last year and a half for cooking classes, and we have been planning them, and we've been planning to do them online for quite some time. And why online? Well, a couple good reasons. One is that we want to make sure that the information is available to anybody, regardless of whether or not they are able to pay for a cooking class or they live far away. We want to make sure that that information is accessible to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. And also that many of our customers live far away. They don't necessarily live here or live here full time. Many come down for just the season or the weekend, or have busy schedules, and so we want the information to be available at your convenience. And so that's why we decided to go with an online format. And so Lowell's going to talk a little bit about how the classes are going to be structured and are going to work.
Yeah, so what we're going to try to do is, instead of saying here's 3 recipes that y'all do, what we're hoping to do is focus on one ingredient each time, and we're going to talk about sort of ways to use that ingredient. Oftentimes you don't have the same things in your pantry that we may have right here. That's probably particularly true right now, and so don't think that you have to follow these recipes directly. What we're trying to do is introduce an ingredient or reintroduce an ingredient and let you know how we think about it, and how it may help you if you've got something like today. You'll be seeing chickpeas that are nutritious, they're shelf stable, and they are amazingly versatile. So we're going to start out today with chickpeas and try to highlight that, and then next class we'll talk about another ingredient, and we'll try to do these regularly so you've got a sense of sort of some pantry staples and how to easily prepare.
Yeah, meal inspo essentially is kind of what we're trying to do, and also share what our perspective of what Italian food and Italian cooking is. Sometimes folks will think that Italian cooking is just red sauce and spaghetti and meatballs, but in fact it's so diverse, very regional, and very delicious, but very, very diverse, and features a range of ingredients. And so we want to make sure to highlight that. In our view, Italian cooking isn't limited to 1 or 2 ingredients, but really is about taking high quality, good, pure ingredients and not over manipulating them, but bringing out the best in those ingredients for something that is, to produce something that's delicious and nutritious as well. So to that goal, we are going to start today with one of my favorite go-to recipes. Like Lowell was saying, chickpeas. We love chickpeas. We'll eat them dried, canned. We're going to talk a little bit about both in case you have canned or dried, depending on what you have in your pantry. So if you have, Lowell's going to talk a little bit about soaking and cooking the chickpeas, but if you have canned chickpeas, that's perfectly fine. You can pick them up for around 89 cents a can at your local store, and just make sure to rinse them well before you use them, would be one little tip we'd want to share.
Yeah, and we also use dried beans a lot. They're actually very, I mean, not that the cans are going to go bad anytime, but the dried chickpeas are even sort of more shelf stable, and they're more compact. So when you rehydrate this jar of chickpeas, which looks to be about the same size, it will actually end up with twice as much chickpeas. So you usually on chickpeas, Ceci, you'll end up with about twice as much per volume as you started out with. And so similarly for $1, you get twice as much if you've got the chance to re-soak them. If you want to soak them, we just soak them overnight. We use about a teaspoon of water for every quart of water. For a pound of beans, we'll use 4 quarts of water, so 4 teaspoons of salt. And then at the end of overnight soak, or if you start in the morning, at the end of 8-10 hours. Just rinse them really well, get the salt out, and then you cook them. Really depends on how dry your chickpeas are. If you've got them fresh, and smaller, you'll see there's lots of different sizes. If you got them fresh and smaller, they could cook in as little as like 45 minutes. And it could take as long as an hour and a half. Just sort of taste them as you go. We just cook them straight with water. You can add like a couple bay leaves and a half of an onion just chopped in half if you want to sort of augment their flavor, but we just like doing them straight, no salt, for about, anywhere from a half hour to hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how big and how dry they are, and then you end up with today's ingredient.
And it's interesting, beans, legumes are actually quite popular in Italian cooking. My grandfather shared that in Italy they ate a lot of beans, and if you travel through Italy, you're likely to have cannellini beans or chickpeas served at some point. So it's, like Lowell said, very healthy, full of fiber, protein, and lots of different nutrition, and fills you up. So we're going to start with one of my favorite go-to recipes. It doesn't require heating anything up, which I really like during the summer when it's very hot down here in South Texas. So we're going to start with, Lowell's going to cut the lemon because I'm not good around knives, as anyone knows. And we don't need a trip to the ER.
Yeah.
And so we're going to start with about a half a lemon. We're really lucky down here in South Texas to have lemons available to us throughout a great part of the year. And lemon is one of those things, just do it to taste. I start with about a squeeze of lemon. And also sometimes we'll zest it. A lot of the flavors in the zest, so it's you don't want to waste that zest too. That's another option as well.
And if you zest it, just get the yellow part. The white part's a little bitter, so if you zest it with a little hand grater, don't get to the white part.
Yeah, and that'll just give you a little more flavor. That's an option. Some people like a little more lemon, a little less lemon. So really, it's up to you. But we start with about a half a squeeze of lemon, because a little goes a long way, and then we're going to add about a tablespoon of parsley. Parsley is another one of those things that's very, very common. This flat leaf parsley you'll see used a lot in Italian cooking. It is not just a humble garnish, but in fact is very nutritious, very good for you, and has a really nice, light, bright, herbaceous taste that is delicious in a lot of different dishes. So we're going to put a little bit of that in here as well.
And the stems are good too, as long as they're not too woody. The stems have a lot of flavor. You can just chop them up a little finer if you want to.
Okay. Thank you. And then we're going to put about 1 clove of garlic in here. Now, it is raw garlic, and some people, I like raw garlic, some people do not. This is kind of one of those things you can adjust to taste. So we're going to, this time, usually we don't use the garlic press, but for this recipe, I find that the garlic press works well because it makes it nice and fine, and then so you don't get as big of a bite of garlic because it is raw. So that's another little tip. And then we're going to use about a half a cup of olive oil. Again, it's basically whatever you have in your pantry, about a quarter to a half a cup. It depends on how much oil you want in it. But
as Italians say, e basta.
E basta.
Put in enough.
Enough, right? So I'm going to use this wonderful Le Ferre Autentico olive oil from Puglia. It's delicious, and I'm going to put in about a quarter cup here, and I'm measuring it. I'm putting this all in a measuring cup. That way you can kind of get a sense for the ingredients, and then also it's one fewer dish to wash. So, and then we're going to put now about a half a cup of chickpeas. These are cooked peas that we soaked and cooked They're not canned, but again, canned will work just fine. We've used those too. So we're gonna put those in, and then we're gonna give it a stir.
And while Deidre's stirring, you'll see on the left, Deidre's got some lemon olive oil. If you don't have lemon handy and you bought one of these lemon olive oils either here or somewhere else and don't know what to do with it, this is the perfect time to put it to good use. Instead of olive oil and lemon, just go with your lemon olive oil.
And so what you have here is a really delicious, bright chickpea salad. And what's fun about this is that it's easy to whip up in just a couple minutes if you're tight on time. And what I also like about it is that you can combine it with so many different ways, so many different other ingredients. For example, you can put this, if you have pita bread, it's great to take a spoonful and put in a pita. If you would like, you could mix it with pasta if you wanted to, but you don't have to. And one of my favorite ways actually to eat this, besides just by itself as a side dish, is on quinoa. And we'll get that out. Or you can get that out for us. We'll show you can just take and cook quinoa, just whatever's available at your local store, and you can just put some of this on there, and it makes a delicious, very healthy either meal or side dish, whatever you like.
And gluten-free if that matters to you.
If you're wanting to avoid gluten, so that's another option. And so just to give a few ideas, and we eat this a lot, particularly in the summer when it's hot and you don't necessarily, like I said, want to turn on the oven or even heat up the stovetop sometimes. So that is the first recipe we wanted to share. And again, it's bright, it's nutritious, and I think we calculated that this whole dish cost about, with all these ingredients, I mean, we had the parsley because we snipped it off our parsley plant on our windowsill, but if you don't and you buy all the ingredients, the whole dish I think came to about $1.75, something like that, right around there, that we calculated, depending on how much, if you're using dry or canned chickpeas, and depending on how much that can of chickpeas costs. So there's a little variation, but essentially under $2, and very healthy. So that's the first dish we wanted to do. And then Lowell, I think, is heating up the skillet for the next dish.
We got the skillet going on.
We got the skillet going.
And so stewed chickpeas, is that the next dish?
Stewed chickpeas is the next thing we're gonna do. And this was a recipe, I got this, my grandpa Gus shared this with me many years ago, and I started making it as one of my favorite, particularly winter meals. You just want to start with, in your pan, put about a tablespoon or so of olive oil. To be honest with you, I don't ever measure olive oil, I just kind of toss it in. It's whatever you're comfortable with. It doesn't have to be a fancy or expensive olive oil, just whatever you have on hand will work. And put that in, and then we're gonna put a little bit of garlic. So we're gonna saute up a little bit of garlic. And sometimes you'll see, you know, there's a couple different ways to do this. Particularly in Italy, you'll see sometimes they'll throw the clove in and then get to infuse the flavor and then pull the clove out. We're not gonna do that because we're gonna let that garlic kind of brown up a little bit, and it will take that raw taste out of it. And then we're gonna take about a teaspoon or tablespoon of rosemary. And chop that up. And
if you got dried rosemary, use about half as much of this. It's got a little more intense flavor. If you're using fresh like we have, we've got, again, the benefit of being here in on the Gulf Coast, so it grows like a weed. Just grab from the top, pull down, it'll take all the fronds off, and then just give it a little rough chop, and we'll throw it into the pan.
Yep. And it'll start to smell really delicious. The garlic already smells lovely, but yep. I must admit, I do love the taste of garlic.
I'm still thinking they should make a perfume that smells like this.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So, I love it. Delicious. So, Lowell's gonna demonstrate his knife skills here, and they're far better than mine. And we will get that browning. And then here you can add, and again, it really depends on what you have in your pantry. You could add, sometimes I put a little pepperoncino, a little red pepper flake in it if you want a little heat. If you don't want a little heat, skip that. I have a little mix here from Calabria, a little mix of oregano and dried parsley and pepperoncino. And so we're gonna throw just a little touch of that in for just a little bit of kick, but not too much. We don't wanna have our mouse on fire here. And so we're gonna let that simmer up. And then once that gets nice and brown, we are gonna take some crushed tomatoes. Now, again, this really depends on whatever you have in your pantry. You'll probably have a can of crushed tomatoes, diced tomatoes, whole tomatoes, whatever, jarred can, it doesn't matter. Just take and if you have them whole, just you can use your hands, just get in there and smush them up. And then,
except for the fact that make sure that you're either wearing an apron if you're me, or when you first smush them, give them a little poke because they will have liquid in it. If you just grab a stewed tomato, a whole tomato and squeeze it, there's going to be juice everywhere.
Yes, yes, I've made that mistake before several times. So anyway, just once that so give that a saute for just a couple minutes. Let that garlic kind of brown up a little bit. That kind of garlic bite be mellowed a little bit, and then we're gonna throw these in, and then we're gonna let that stew for about 5 to 10 minutes, I would say. I'm gonna go ahead and add that in. Get that going. Delicious. And so we're just gonna let that, we're gonna keep it uncovered because we want the liquid that is in those tomatoes to kind of simmer out and to reduce down a little bit. And then I would say cook this for about, I don't know, 10 minutes. Just watch it and see when it's the consistency that you like. And we used about roughly a cup of tomatoes, but it really depends. You can use a can if that's what you have. I'd say that's about right. And then what we do is we're gonna cook this for about 10 minutes, and once that all kind of, the flavors meld together, then take about a cup of chickpeas, add to it, and let that simmer for maybe another 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more. We've got this on, I would say, medium to low heat, but again, it might depend on your cooktop. And so then when this is done, it will come out looking beautiful, and we're going to put a little garnish on it because our serving suggestion is going to be very delicious here. And you can use this with a variety of other foods. For example, the way that my grandpa Gus liked to eat this was a way to use kind of old crusty bread. He never threw away food, and you know, it was a great way to use old bread that might be dried out or going a little stale, and you can soak up that good tomato juice. That's wonderful. You could mix it with pasta if you wanted to, but certainly, or eat it on its own, just like this is kind of a side dish. So really it's up to you, but it's pretty much all, with the exception of the parsley from the garden, it's all just really cooked from your pantry. But again, very filling, very healthy, and very affordable as well. And so one other tip is if you're cooking, depending on whether you're using dried beans that you soaked and cooked or canned beans, one tip is if you are using canned beans, you might want to let this simmer a little bit less so they don't get overcooked. That sometimes, depending on the kind of canned bean, will happen. So for example, if you're using canned beans, you might want to let it go, say 5 minutes, whereas if you're using the beans that you prepared from dry beans, you could maybe go, you know, closer to 10. And again, just use it with some crusty bread and you're good to go. And we recommend definitely garnish this with just a nice chopped up parsley, or that sort of thing would be really, really delicious.
Yeah.
Simple ingredients, easy to prepare.
And if you don't have tomatoes, you can use tomato sauce. If you've got like 86 jars of pasta sauce that you bought and you don't know what to do with, this is a great use for that. It doesn't all, it doesn't have to go on pasta sauce. You could also, or on pasta, you could also mix this in with some sauteed veggies. If you wanted beans and veggies, it would make a really nice sort of like chunky, almost ratatouille. But the way that we think of the chickpeas is sort of the primary sort of almost like meat substitute, right? So here what it is it's serving as a carrier for those really nice bright lemony flavors in a cold dish. It makes a great salad. You can put it over lettuce, you can put it over quinoa, you can eat it on the side next to a little something else. And here you've got a hot chickpea dish that's similar. You're just using something to essentially season it. The chickpea is the star of both of the dishes, but what you're doing is using some medium that you would otherwise use for either like a salad dressing. This is lemon and olive oil and parsley. It's essentially, a salad dressing. This is a pasta sauce, essentially, right? But you're using those condiments as the carrier to flavor your chickpeas. And either one, hot or cold, is just a great way to get really inexpensive, really healthy protein that's shelf stable. It'll last you for years, and you can pull it out whenever you need it.
Absolutely, because tomato sauce and tomatoes are great to use on a variety of things, not just pasta. They're great for mixing with chickpeas, with cannellini beans, as well as vegetables. We love to take a pasta sauce or tomatoes and mix with zucchini, sauteed zucchini. So there are a lot of different ways to use those items in your pantry and to make delicious dishes. And so this week we have highlighted one of our favorites and a couple of our favorite dishes, and the chickpea, which we eat quite frequently. But next week we're going to talk about another of our favorites, is the cannellini bean, and show several dishes and several different ideas for not only ways you can prepare them, but ways that you can serve them. So that will be the next class ingredient.
Thanks for... And sorry for what may have been a rough edit there, but we forgot wine. So wine...
How could we do that?
How could
I
we
don't
forget
even
wine?
know
You're an Italian
how did that
cowboy.
happen.
So with the lemon chickpea salad, it's got a nice lemoniness to it. You want something that's not going to fight with that. We love the Gavi. It's a nice citrusy, somewhat citrusy, somewhat smooth wine from the Piedmont. It's relatively inexpensive. Before we closed, this was going for $12.99, so a good value. Goes really well with something nice and bright. And with the stewed chickpeas, you want something that's not too fruity. You don't want anything that's going to be really like a, like a Merlot or something like that, maybe a little too fruity. We like something a little earthy, a little medium-bodied. One of our favorites is an Aglianico. It's from Campania, where they also have a lot of tomatoes and chickpeas. And so it's just a wonderful sort of like slightly earthy, medium-bodied red. A Chianti would work well, as would any sort of Sangiovese. And when in doubt, as Deidre will tell you, bubbles will go with anything.
Everything.
So if you needed to come up with a wine that complemented both of these, bubbles are a great option. We'd suggest something a little more crisp and clean. A Valdobbiadene Prosecco is a great option. A little less fruity than the regular Prosecco, the regular Glera. The Valdobbiadene is nice and crisp and clean and would complement both of these. So apologize for the rough edit, but who can forget wine?
But who can forget wine? And once we are able to reopen the store, you will always see, Gavi, Prosecco, Valdobbiadene, of course, Aglianico. Those will always be wines that we will always try to have in stock in the store, because they're so versatile and pair with a variety of delicious food. And are some of our favorites. So these will be things that we will always stock.
Yeah. And so with that, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks, y'all.
We hope to see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye, y'all. Take care. We miss you guys. Bye.